Hey guys, Steven here, Fanatic Perspective. It is that time of the year to talk college hoops. I have my college basketball friends, my gang here back. We are back and better than ever. We're going to be covering college basketball this year, not just Texas, but the SEC and all around, just sharing our thoughts. Bunch of hoops enthusiasts. Fellas, how we doing today? Happy to have y'all here.
I'm great, Steve. Great to be here.
Awesome, awesome. Ryan, I know Ryan and CK, y'all are going to be heading, to Vegas to watch some early hoops, right? So I can't wait to hear the reports back from that experience. But today we're going to be previewing Texas basketball, Texas basketball's transition to the SEC, expectations for the season. So if you're looking to put some money down on certain players or over unders on win totals, or if we have a chance for the SEC, we're going to share our thoughts with you. Hopefully, can help and influence that. And then at the back end of this video, we'll also talk about just general college basketball storylines. A lot to talk about, right? UConn getting their coach back after the Lakers were right there for them and defending national champs. We got Cooper Flag in the building now, so lots to discuss. But hit that like button, subscribe, the whole bit. A lot of new faces on this Texas team. Rodney Terry, now his third season, but second season as the full-time coach of the Texas Longhorns. Coming off of I would say, a okay season last year, all things considered. But I remember when I was talking with you guys last year, I felt the same way. The offseason was really disappointing in terms of how things happened, the players that we lost, Ron Holland, AJ Johnson, all the chaos that ensued. I think there's a quiet optimism considering how the offseason went this cycle. So with all the new faces, Ryan, I'm gonna go to you first. Who are you most excited for to see in this Texas roster?
Yeah, it starts with the man bringing the ball down the court. Jordan Pope, transfer from Oregon State, averaged close to 18 points, shot 45% from the field, almost 40% clip from three, and 90 from the free throw line. So one thing that we have had that's been good for us the last few years has been guard play. There's been ups and downs within the folks that have been through those cycles, but overall, it's going to start there with having a floor general who can help some of these other transfer guys that just came in. We do have some returners, which we'll talk about, but I think Jordan Pope is the guy from my side who I'm really excited to have in, a guy who can score at a good clip and also distribute the ball really well.
Having a lead guard that can score and distribute and be the best of both worlds, and it's proven, right? So I'm excited to see Jordan. I was really excited when they were able to close that commitment. What about you, Austin?
Yeah, I'm going to probably go with the consensus popular pick since Ryan left me up for a layup. I'm going to go with baby KD, Trey Johnson, true freshman out of Link Academy, but formerly Lake Highlands High School. I was, lucky enough to call a couple of his games in high school. Number one player in the country for an extended amount of time. I think those 247 ratings might have dropped them down a little bit, but nonetheless, a top five player in the country. Obviously a consistent scorer can be a threat at different levels. Just really has a knack for putting the ball in the basket. Kind of a little fun nugget. He's a 90% free throw shooter throughout his career in high school and including EYBL. So he's going to get a ton of easy points there. But prefers to play off of a dribble, has a fluid handle, has a dynamic first step. So couldn't be more excited about the rumblings we're hearing in these secret scrimmages. He had 31 points against Colorado the other day, so could not be more excited about what Trey Johnson's going to bring. It's been a while since we've had a guy of his caliber make it on the 40, so couldn't be more excited.
It's heavy comparing somebody to KD, and KD, he's one of one, but in terms of pure scoring at this age, definitely I would say the best player we've seen come onto the 40 in terms of pure scoring since Kevin Durant came on campus.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 2006, right? So 18 years ago. Trey Johnson, another thing too with him, McDonald's All-American game, star-studded McDonald's All-American game, right? All them dudes out there, them Rutgers boys, the Cooper Flags of the world, VJs out there, and he was scoring with the best of them. And what was impressive to me was what he was doing off the catch. Limited dribbles, but just being available, shot ready, and firing. He was like Ray Allen out there, but also getting to the cup, easy buckets, cutting. So it looks like his basketball IQ is very high. We'll see if he can defend at this level and give us what we need. Colin, I'm gonna go to you, man.
Yeah,
They took the stars from us.
last and least, let's just go that way. Both on the tech side and well, I'm going to go Arthur Kaluma. I think going with somebody who's a senior who's played, well over 4 years of collegiate basketball, starting at Creighton and then transitioning to Kansas State last year. Averages almost 15 points a game, 7 rebounds. So can kind of go down there in Big 12 play and go get rebounds as well, but can still make threes at almost a 35% clip and shoots over 70% from the free throw line. So I think you're getting a guy who can probably step in and be a leader for somebody like Trey Johnson, who's similar size but has played significantly more basketball. And I think that's a big piece when you take a look at a lot of the guys that we brought in, the Kalumas, the Kents, the Larrys, both from Indiana State there. Somebody like Tremont Mark as well, who's just played a lot of basketball at the collegiate level. And so when you have, 38% of your roster kind of returning, that's important to have folks who can step in, who have played a lot of basketball and can kind of lead the younger guys like Trey and some of the others who should play big minutes this year for us.
Colin, you mentioned Arthur Kaluma. That was Ryan's wish list guy. If anybody watched us a year ago, when he was in the portal, and Ryan was like, "Hey, I want Kaluma." That was when he was out of Creighton, I think, at the time, before he went to Kansas State, and we lost that one that time. Now, to kind of finish out the roster, we got Kaluma really late when you think about the scholarship allotment. So much needed, because one of the concerns I have for this team is in the front court, size wise. I told y'all last year when we were playing Cincinnati, I like my enforcers. I need, we can't just have all skilled guys. We need some enforcers out there. I need my Christian Bishops of the world to set the tone that we ain't going to have no mess going on in the paint. It's important, especially in college basketball. So to have that, I think Arthur Kaluma can provide that. I think he's actually overqualified probably for that role. But we're going to need that, because he's the only, there's not a whole bunch of guys with that body and physical skill set that can play a whole lot of minutes, that can give us what we need to protect some of these guys like the Trey Johnsons, the Marks, and the Popes, who are going to need space, right? When we talk about screening and opportunities just to play clean basketball. I'm going to go reverse order now. So, Colin, concerns for you, right, for this team. You brought up Tremont Mark and the experience he has in the SEC. He's coming over from our Arkansas team. Eric Musselman goes to USC. We know Coach Cal's now at Arkansas, and so we're benefiting from having some of that experience in conference. But I guess some of my thing is, how's the team going to gel, right? Where do the minutes come from? That's for Rodney Terry to figure out, and he will be responsible for that. But where are your concerns overall with this roster in terms of Texas basketball?
Yeah, it's hard to kind of have initial concerns beyond chemistry and minutes when you've probably got, around 9 guys who could probably get meaningful minutes. And those for me are the Trey Johnsons, the Kalumas, the Kents, the Larrys, the Marks. Zarek Onyema could get some minutes this year. Jordan Pope will obviously play a lot. Malik Presley comes over from Vandy, where he played pretty sparingly last year. And then the other two kind of stalwarts from last year being Caden Shedrick and Kendall Weaver. And so when you look at last year's team, the initial concerns there are you able to go rebound? Because this isn't much of a larger team than it was last year, and you were 184th in rebounding margin last year, over 215, I think, and you turn the ball over at that mark and have a pretty terrible kind of net turnover margin. And are you able to crash the glass with guys like Kaluma, somebody like Trey Johnson, who is still, to his credit, probably 6'5", 6'6", but like 185, 190. So is he able to put on enough weight and rebound at the collegiate level, as well as a lot of freshmen who don't have that ability?
Austin, style of play. You hit on concerns as well, but I'm curious to Colin's point about size and stature of guys. I'm also thinking about style of play. Is this going to be more of an up and down type of basketball team by necessity? What do you foresee?
Yeah, I'm I mean, elephant in the room is probably consistent big play, and that Colin hit on it a little bit, but we bring in these talented transfers, and I'm just going to read just across a couple of guys, just their averages. I mean, Pope is a guy that averaged 18, Larry's a guy that averaged 11, Mark's a guy that's averaged between 16 and 19 throughout his career. You have a guy like Trey Johnson who's coming in, expected to play high level minutes, be a 15 to 20 point guy a night, and on paper that looks awesome, right? You're like, man, that's on a bad night Texas is scoring 75, 80 points, right? And that's just not realistic in college basketball. I mean, I hope so, but not that there's only one ball and it can only go in one hoop. But I am interested to see just how this team gels early. I'm actually really glad we play a team like Ohio State, who the Big Ten media picked them pretty much top half. I've seen them anywhere from like 6 to 9, in their projected Big Ten. So it's not like we're going out and playing, Popcorn State or something like that. And it's in Vegas, so it's neutral. So it'll be a good first test for the Longhorns. Just a good barometer where we can say, hey, okay, this team looks good. And I know it's only one game, and then they have some cupcakes after that. But it'll be really interesting to see kind of right off the bat, like, okay, what's this team going to look like? I'm so interested to see just how RT divides the minutes amongst the guards. I don't know if it's going to be sort of like a ride the hot hand deal, which we've seen, from previous Texas staffs, or it's going to be pretty evenly distributed. So, but it's all exciting things. Like, these are good, I guess, concerns to have preseason. We've been in way worse situations. So all in all, I'm just excited to get it going.
Ryan, I feel like you're more optimistic just overall year over year from last year coming in. I felt like we were like, okay, we kind of salvaged the roster and the team with Max and everything when we got those guys. But now it's like, these are pieces that we like Trey Johnson was a number one target, right? We were in there with A&M for Jordan Pope. These are guys that we were getting our number one targets, right, to put this roster together. I personally feel this roster gels better than it did. I thought we had good players last year, but they didn't fit necessarily together. What are you looking for when you guys go to Vegas early on, man? What are you looking to see from this team that you're really paying attention to early on, that your basketball mind is like, this is going to go the way I think it's going to go, or I don't like what I see?
Yeah, I think a couple things. The first one is last year's team was very top heavy. I feel like all of our scoring came from a few of the top 3 guys on the team, whereas I think this year we'll see an even distribution. The other thing from a style perspective, Steve, because that's a really good point, zooming even out further from our team, just the style of play moving conferences. It's the same conversation we have with the football team and how they've transitioned in the style of play. Take the exhibition that happened last week, for example, with Arkansas and Kansas. Kansas, I believe, was consensus number 1 or picked to win the Big 12, and Arkansas just boat raced them, like took them to town. So that'll be interesting to see from moving from playing the Kansases, the Kansas State of the world, and having a 105 to 100 point game. I don't think we're going to be seeing as much of that in the SEC based on how the teams are constructed across the board. I think there's going to be more parity from the SEC standpoint. So the last thing I would say from a concern standpoint is the depth of the bigs and getting into foul trouble. What's going to happen? We talked a little bit before we got on the air about potentially having Kaluma play the 5 and go a more small ball lineup. I think we can do that with the guys that we have. Last year, it would have been a disaster because you would have had 3 guys that were under 6'2" on the floor. And so you need to have that size in the SEC. So overall, it's going to be a fun weekend to see those guys in Vegas against a good Ohio State team. I think the line's at like -2.5 right now, favoring Texas. So it'll be interesting. Basically a coin flip at this point. But
so you walked us right into the next topic, right? Transitioning into the SEC. And when I look at the wings, the size of our wings, this is probably the best size of wings we've had between Tremont Mark, Trey Johnson. I mean, even a guy like Kent, who can play, kind of in between. Arthur Kaluma can play in between. Those guys are 6'7", 6'8", have better length and can guard multiple positions as well. Even in the backcourt, we don't have a guy like Max where, let's be honest, he was being cherry-picked on defense, especially towards the back end of the Big 12 schedule. Everybody guarded us the same, put us in the same type of scenarios. Colin, when you look at Texas transitioning to the SEC, what's the biggest thing you think is going to be the biggest difference between the Big 12 in your opinion?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a huge difference. I would say top to bottom, the Big 12 is probably a better basketball conference. Obviously, it's very different when you take a look at football and kind of what we're doing there right now. But on the basketball side, I think from top to bottom, the Big 12 is just a better basketball conference. I think the difference in Houston's football and basketball program is leaps and bounds. I think you still have a very physical style of play that most folks are leaning on their defense, and now you do have a lot different of coaches than you did last year. I think you touched on Coach Cal, obviously moving down to Arkansas, and then Pope coming over from BYU to go to Kentucky, and a number of other changes there. But Mississippi State is probably one of the better defensive teams in the country. Very similar in terms of play style to Houston. They don't score as well. They don't have as much talent. But I would say you're actually probably in a better spot in terms of wanting to reach your basketball goals, being the SEC relative to the Big 12 with kind of our broad and historic basketball program and the other schools that are in the conference as well.
Yeah, the coaching aspect is interesting. So we have our former head coach, Chris Beard, in the conference. We have Coach Cal moving schools. Like you said, Coach Pope is coming over, so we saw him in the Big 12 last season. And then you have, Alabama over there, Coach Oates. A lot of expectations for him, especially coming off of last year's tournament. We have our former coach at Tennessee, good old Rick Barnes, right? So it's a lot of interesting faces in people. Austin, how do you see Rodney Terry stacking up and handling this? I mean, what are your expectations for Texas?
Yeah,
Starting to get into that conversation.
I'll agree with Colin. I think the Big 12 is probably a better overall basketball conference. We were, kind of talking about this off air a little bit, and I wanted to Google just myself. There's been 11 draft picks, first round guys out of the SEC the last two NBA drafts, which is, 18% of the last two NBA drafts have been SEC guys. So I feel like almost every team in the SEC has kind of that guy, and if not, and not just like potential lottery guy necessarily, but just like a dynamic scorer. You kind of look at like an Anthony Edwards at Georgia, right? Like he was the straw that stirred their drink. But I can just kind of go down the list. I mean, Reed Shepherd, Rob Dillingham, Dalton Connect. I mean, all these, Brandon Miller, Anthony Black, like all these SEC teams kind of have that dynamic first rounder where I don't think we necessarily saw that in the Big 12. Not to say, those teams weren't really good. But as far as like sheer star power, like you're facing a dude every night, night in and night out. And that's just going to be really fun to watch for us, not only as fans, but it'll be really just interesting to see how Rodney Terry coaches around that. I mean, he's had to do it before, but now you're doing it, 20 times a year. So it'll be very interesting to see just kind of how he, puts his big boy pants on and goes and shuts down a potential first rounder more often than not every night in the SEC.
It's interesting you bring that up because in the Big 12, to me, and maybe y'all can agree or disagree, it felt like it was more veteran 3-year, 4-year guys, even some of the guys that were transfer, but it was more about the coach. Like when you play Baylor, you're going up against Scott Drew, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're dealing with Drew, you're dealing with the Bill Selfs of the world in Kansas. He would have the guys like Hunter who weren't like NBA, they're like fringe NBA guys, but they're really high level veteran college basketball players that have been there forever. It's not like Kansas. I mean, Kansas has had their share of NBA draft picks. Don't get me wrong. So is Baylor, but it's not like they were churning them out like crazy, like in the SEC, where you have these really high ranked freshmen and guys that were asked to carry their teams. So it does seem like we're dealing more with a talent thing than dealing with these coaching masterminds. Even Iowa State, like you're dealing with TJ, you deal with all these people that are just great coaching minds. It seemed like Coach Sampson at Houston. So I think that's going to be something to really pay a lot of attention to. Ryan, lead us into the expectation, kind of discussion. Where long term, where do you see this? Do they have a chance to win the SEC? Do they have a chance to have a good postseason run? What are reasonable expectations for Texas fans to have for Rodney Terry's group?
Projected standings say no based on where we're sitting. If we're looking at the rankings right now, I think we're sitting at 7th in the conference is what they're projecting us. I will say at a micro level, if you look how Texas has done the last 4 years against the SEC in the Big 12 Challenge, we've lost 3 of the last 4. And the one that we've won was by 1 point at home at Rick Barnes' reunion and for the final year in the Irwin Center. So I think it's going to be an uphill climb. The interesting thing that a lot of people will be excited about is from 2.5 years ago is this is truly Rodney Terry's team. There's not one man on that roster that is from the Beard era. I think Shedrick was last year too. So this is a completely new roster, and it's all Rodney Terry. So I think we can finally put those either yaysayers or naysayers to rest on, can Rodney Terry coach the Texas basketball team in the SEC? I think we'll be able to unequivocally say that after this year. So in terms of expectations, I think they're low for him this year compared to where we were last year after the Elite Eight run,
Sure.
after going down to the wire with Tennessee last year in the tournament. 7th is where we're projected in most standings. Bama, Auburn lead the top of it. So I think we're going to have our opportunity, and it's going to depend on how we gel throughout the season. And we get some good tests. UConn early on at home is going to be a fun game. Day after the SEC championship game in football. So we'll see if a lot of folks will be traveling back from that or be readily available. So I think it's going to be a good test for Rodney Terry, and he can finally put a lot of the naysayers to rest if he comes out and performs and gets his team rocking and rolling.
Yeah, a lot of tests, man. We're going to see, Coach Hurley's group, like I said, the Lakers threw a bag at him, and he stayed at UConn. And he's got some freshmen and Liam McNeely coming in, another dynamic one, and rebuilding his team. So the out of conference schedule is going to be interesting. Colin, how do you look at that? Do you agree with Ryan, or do you see anything different there?
No, I mean, if you look at Ken Palm, which is where I do a lot of my research, and then, The Athletic has great articles, John Rothstein, CBS Sports, is kind of in that top like 5 or 6 of the conference. I think, you've got probably 2 or 3 clear cut like teams right now with Auburn, Alabama, and Tennessee. And then you've kind of got this like next group of 3 or 4 and really 5 with A&M, Texas, Arkansas, and Florida. And then Mississippi State's going to play defense. And then you've kind of got that bottom half of the conference with rebuilding Kentucky, Beard at Mississippi, who's always going to play defense, Oklahoma, LSU, Missouri, Georgia, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, who just traditionally aren't very good at basketball. And so I think if you set the expectation of, kind of a top 7-ish finish in conference, that probably has you in an at-large bid somewhere. But I think it'll take time, and a lot of those tests early should be a good gauge for us and generally fans to go see us play. Syracuse, to go obviously this weekend. Ryan and I are going to Vegas to watch us play Ohio State, which a lot of people actually have finishing as a dark horse first in the Big Ten conference, with Zach Edey leaving and Purdue probably rebuilding some as well. Then you've got Hurling and UConn coming, which will probably be one of the better games we play this year. But then to kick off SEC play, we have to go play at A&M, and so that's going to be a really good basketball game too. And so I think you, very similarly to the Big 12, have a lot of close games in conference play. But in terms of kind of setting the stage, I'd say getting a top 5, top 7 finish in the SEC probably gets you in the tournament, and then you kind of go from there.
Yeah, I know injuries will be a factor as well. One, we talked a lot about all the newcomers, and Austin, I'll get your answer on expectations, but we asked in the group chat, where's Weaver factor in this group? Because I feel like he's kind of the culture guy, if you will, if I had to have one for Rodney Terry, because that's it, right? Everybody else is really, really new. And Cedric's playing is your 5 man. So, I mean, I look at him more if he needs to focus on that. Quick roundtable. Where do y'all see Weaver? Because I love the guy. And I think he became a fan favorite for this team, the way he played and the athleticism, how hard he played. Austin, I'll start with you. I'll just go quick roundtable there.
Yeah, I'm a big Weaver fan, and I'll make this quick. I mean, the hustle minutes are second to none. He's the guy that would go in and be the spark plug off the bench. Now, that's not to say he's not going to make a boneheaded play or a bad pass or take a bad shot, with early in the shot clock or something like that. But it always felt like he would go and still does go just full speed. And I coach myself as well as I know Ryan's done the same, and we would probably tell our guys, hey, if you're going to mess up, at least go full speed, right? And just no hesitation, and that's kind of the way that Weaver plays. So I really do appreciate that out of him, and it'll be really interesting to see his kind of accelerated role. But I would love to see him be that unanimous kind of team leader where they kind of rely on him, not necessarily because of what he does on the court with his play and fill up a stat sheet, but just that veteran presence that's been in an NCAA tournament before and has played with the Max Abesmiths and guys like that. So I'm really excited for Weaver. He's great.
Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, the torch has been passed from Brock Cunningham to Weaver. So he's our new glue guy. And I think coming off the bench is where I would like to see him personally. I know he's probably going to get some looks starting just based on the experience and where Rodney Terry knows he's going to get. Would be interesting to look at last year coming off the bench versus starting. Similar, Brock was in a similar situation. Great player for us, but his numbers seem to reflect more positively when he was coming off the bench with that second group and providing that energy. We're also going to need some guard play with that second group. I know Julian Larry is going to be a good fit for that backup point guard position, but in terms of having that second guard who can bring the ball up and make plays there, I think that's what we're going to see out of him this year.
And CK, I'll go to you for Weaver.
Yeah, he's an interesting fit, right? Because to Steve's point, became kind of a fan favorite, became like, I think what people would want to be representative of Texas basketball. A really great defender, very athletic. I think if you just solely look at numbers, I would say a pretty poor shooter. Shot under 25% from 3-point land last year, but always seemed to make one when we kind of needed it. And so I think he's kind of that dog type player who can go out and really bother some of those more maybe star oriented scorers in the SEC throughout kind of all of conference play. So maybe that's kind of how you utilize him in terms of being that culture guy and driving other guys to, really kind of lock down when it's necessary in conference play as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you said it. We need dogs, flat out, because when you're going against, you said we open SEC play at Texas A&M, right? So that means we're going to be playing Wade Taylor, right?
Yep.
I need to throw a dog at him, and if I can have everybody else focus on what they need to do, and I say Weaver, go pick up 40 feet on a Wade and just be as Ryan's guy, be a Dylan Brooks out there. There's value in that, right?
No, I think that's right too. And it's not like you get to play A&M and then go play Vandy. You have to play Auburn and then you play Tennessee right after that. And so you better buckle in immediately when conference play starts. Otherwise, you're sitting there 0-3 before you get to play Oklahoma away. So it's not an easy schedule by any means either.
And I think that was kind of the frustration that set in last season, where we got off to a slow start in Big 12 play before we kind of found our skis. And so getting off to that good start, and people, I mean, honestly, the story of this team is going to be if guys buy into their roles. Austin, you've been big on calling, hey, we got a group of mercenaries. They got to gel into a team. But Julian Larry being a guy coming from Indiana State, for example, who averaged double digits, who's used to a certain, usage rate. Some of y'all's usage rates are going to fluctuate, right? And so that buy-in is ultimately going to be what Rodney Terry is really going to be judged on. Because if guys buy into their roles, they got talent. They got the wing ability to finish above expectations, in my opinion. And then we know March is matchups, right? If you get in the right bracket, the right seed, anything can happen. Anything else you guys want to add from an expectation standpoint, open forum in terms of Texas before we move on to the national kind of talk?
I'll just go real quick. I mean, I'm just looking at the schedule. A lot of people gave Texas football grief for having like the cakewalk schedule. Well, the SEC outdid themselves with probably the exact opposite for basketball. Not only does Texas go everywhere, I mean, I know everybody hates Texas, but trips to College Station, Fayetteville, Norman, Baton Rouge, Oxford, Mississippi to see Chris Beard, like they did Texas zero favors at all. And like, it's like they just said, I'm not sure if it was Ryan or Colin, but as I was looking at the schedule, but I mean, just to open it up at A&M, Auburn, Tennessee, then you're on the road in Norman and Gainesville before you come home and face Missouri and then Texas A&M again. So it is really going to be an every single night gauntlet. And like you said earlier, Steve, it's going to be so interesting to just see the health of this team. Because lottery picks, regardless, this is still a really physical league, where it might not be known for it, but you're going to get guys that are in there to bang every single night. So it'll be exciting for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't even mention Coach Pearl over at Auburn. I mean, this SEC basketball league has evolved over the years. Growing up, it wasn't the craziest league. It was really,
Mm-hmm.
Coach Donovan at Florida, Kentucky. It was really top heavy when I was growing up. Bama wasn't like this, like we have now. Where they have, I mean, on a national, we want to pick that conversation up. They have Final Four aspirations. I feel like that's what's on Nate Oates' head, right? The expectations that Coach Cal is going to carry at Arkansas. They paid money for him, so really interesting to see how that all shakes out. I'm paying attention to the star power. I think there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on college basketball this year. What Coach Shire has done at Duke in that recruiting class, I know people will say it was bought by Nike. Hey, you can say whatever you want to say, but they got star power there, right? So just even Baylor having BJ Edgecombe, who I love, and he was balling in the Olympics. These are guys that are playing against grown men. Cooper Flagg was a part of the Team USA scrimmage team playing against grown men. So, and already seeing some of the early exhibition results. Trey Johnson, what were those numbers again that Trey put up? And
31 and 12.
yeah, this class might be different, y'all. What national storylines are y'all paying attention to? I mean, Colin mentioned no more Zach Edey, who have been dominating college basketball the last couple of years. What national storylines are you paying attention to, Colin?
Yeah, I think the big one that you've touched on and probably everybody is exhausted is Cooper Flag. And is he as good as everybody has seen his highlights in USA basketball and in high school and since his mixtapes, since he's been pretty young? Um, so I think that's probably a big one. I think the other ones in terms of storylines are how, Coach Calipari does down in Arkansas, and then ultimately like what Pope does at Kentucky and what like that rebuilding looks like in the SEC. And I think the other ones like Gonzaga is totally rebuilt. They bring back basically everybody besides Anton Watson, bring in, two basically all conference players in Cleve Battle and Michael Ajayi from Pepperdine, and then are stacked in the front with Graham Ike, who basically averaged a double-double, Ben Gregg and Braden Huff. So I think, that could be a really good team. And then going back to the SEC, you've got an Alabama team that is still incredibly interesting, incredibly good, and really well coached. So, Mark Sears, who may have been, if not for the Kentucky or the UConn guys, one of the best players in the NCAA tournament last year, coming back with probably the best big man from Rutgers on the boards and Cliff O'Mary. And then you've still got, Grant Nelson to go either at the 4 or 5 if they want to go big or small. And so I think that's a really, really talented team too. And some of the teams that I'm kind of looking forward to watching throughout the year.
I'm looking to see. You brought up Rutgers. I'm looking to see Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper at Rutgers, who I call mob ties because I don't know how else they got over there in New Jersey. But when you have two people like that, I know they're both freshmen, but they're going to be expected to carry a heavy load. And apparently, Ace Bailey is now 6'10", so that's a national one that I'm looking to see. Outside of the Cooper Flag storylines. What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I would say just alignment, the realignment that happened. You're going to have some fun matchups in the Big 12 too that might get overlooked. BYU is moving into that conference. Colorado,
Arizona.
yeah, Colorado playing them. I think that's going to be a fun Big 12. Let's see if Kelvin Sampson can keep U of H in that stature in the top 10. And then our move to the SEC in Oklahoma is how can we fare against these new teams that will be playing? That'll be fun. I think to your point, Steve, NIL is going to start to really play into basketball to where you could have these mid-major teams if they have the right resources and the funding could compete with the big players. So I was actually going to bring up Colin's second favorite team, the Gonzaga Bulldogs. It's like, do they have the donors to keep up with some of these other teams who might have the funds to where Mark Few can continue to win at the rate that he does until he gets to the tournament and the championship. But that's neither here nor there. So I think that's this alignment in the NIL is going to be interesting with how that plays into these different conferences. And I think we're going to have a lot more upsets this year too, based off of some of those NIL activities.
It's interesting you say that because you look at a team like Indiana State, who we absolutely rated, right? And there were people were all. I mean, they went to the championship game in the NIT. Obviously, they had my man. What was his name? The Kareem Abdul-Jabbar kid,
Rex
Cream.
Mix.
Robbie Avila.
Yeah, Robbie Avila, who he's at St. Louis now, right? Where he followed the coach. But NIL, that whole team got paid. Like when you look at all those guys that wherever they went. So, it's really interesting to hear you say that, Ryan, because some of these kids that will be showcased, I mean, Grant Nelson's another one who was in the Dakotas, and then now he's front and center, and now he's a star coming into that. Dalton Connect, star, came to Tennessee, and now he's in the LA Lakers rotation, right? So I think that's a very interesting dynamic of college basketball to see. Austin, I'll let you kind of have the parting thoughts on this conversation before we wrap up.
Yeah, as far as national headlines, I'll touch on what Colin said. Alabama really sticks out to me. I've been very vocal that I don't think Nate Oates' style of play can win you 6 consecutive games in the NCAA tournament. I know that sounds like big hater mode, especially how awesome the run was last year. But I just don't think you can do it. A team that shoots upwards of 30 to 40 potential threes a game is you're just asking for an off night. We don't even see NBA teams that can do that. That's not to say that they potentially could win 30 games in the regular season this year, but keep an eye on Alabama. I think they'll cruise and have every right to be a 1 seed or a high 2 seed in the tournament. But you heard it here first. I just don't think they will ultimately be able to cut down the nets in the end of March. And then another thing we talked about at the very beginning, how Texas is kind of picked 7 through 8, 7, 8, 9, kind of in the SEC. There was 8 SEC teams that made the NCAA tournament last year, and that was before Texas and Oklahoma were in the conference. So if you just kind of stay under the radar, nobody really talk about Texas, just kind of hover on that top half of the conference line, you're gonna do enough to get in, and that's really all you can ask for is the ticket to the dance. And it's like you said earlier, Steve, it's all about matchups, and you hope you play your way into not a first 4 line or something like that, but just get the ticket to the dance and let the chips fall where they may. So those 2 things I'm definitely looking forward to watching this season.
Last bit I have on this video for Texas fans. I know we go to Oxford to play Beard, and to me that's just a road game. It's not awkward because, as Ryan said, there's no players here. It's just really people that were on the staff, if you were here or not. Do they come to Austin? No.
Mm-mm.
They do not.
Okay, so we don't even have to deal with that because that would be drama. That would be drama. And whenever it happens, that will be drama. But us going there, I mean, to me, it's a tough road game, and like Colin said, they will always be very good. Chris Beard there defensively. I think Mark Adams is back with him too, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so they got the band back together down there, trying to rebuild Texas Tech. But hey, I'm excited. Any party shots, Colin? You go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, one of the probably last questions I think is worth discussing. If you had to take a flyer on one team to go win the tournament 5-6 months from now, for me, it's like you probably have four teams to look at, and that's UConn basically just because of what Hurley can do. The Kansas, the Duke because of Cooper Flag and what they're doing there. And then the last one fluctuates for me. It's really like an Alabama or Gonzaga. I think Baylor could be a dark horse. Iowa State could be a dark horse too, with O'Meary going from Miami over to Baylor, Jeremy Roach going over to Baylor, and then kind of what TJ has done at Iowa State as well. So those are some of the teams I'm looking at. Again, it's probably all 10 plus 1 or 10 to 1 plus on those odds, but those are some of the things I think Ryan and I will probably go look at in the sports books while we're in Vegas over the weekend.
Nice. I like how you gave the fans a little sprinkle of who they might be able to put some money on early on those national championship odds. Austin, party thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to go on the question of kind of like teams to look at, I mean, I'm not partial to them by any means, but Kelvin Sampson and U of H, I mean, they got some guys, man. I mean, they actually got OU's leading scorer, Milos Uzan, transferred down there. He was a pretty dynamic scorer, as we saw in Norman for a couple of years, and they returned LJ Cryer and a crop of those guards that they just seem to turn out every year. But again, anybody in that top 10 way too early ranking, I'm pretty much a fan of, except for I'll stamp it again, Alabama. They're not going to cut down the Nets market.
And I'll close with Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, just it's going to be a fun season. Exciting new times. It's a fresh start. I think, like I said, first full season with a roster that is built by Rodney Terry. You have the exact same coaching staff this year to last year, so there's been no adjustments there. I think that's going to be the interesting piece to keep an eye on. And then we have some fun games in December too. We'll go play Syracuse in New York, and then have the potential to play St. Joseph or Tech, which would be a nice, rekindle of that rivalry. So it's going to be a fun year. RT's 43-21 in his 2 years. I think we're going to get more of an idea of what to expect going forward for the program.
I love how you set the tone there, right? Like you drew the line in the sand. It's accurate. This, whether you're a hater or a supporter, we're going to know now this is his team. There's no elements of Chris Beard left here other than, him being former assistant. But in terms of the roster, this is a roster that he put together. He's worked in conjunction with the Texas Boosters and everybody to help fund the NIL and get questions we had before, honestly, about, hey, are we doing everything we can? I feel like the way they put this roster together, there's no excuses. Yeah. I feel like maybe one or two guys that if we wanted to be perfect, but for the most part, we got our targets. So excited for this season. Y'all hit the like button. We talking hoops now. Like button, subscribe, the whole bit. Thank you to Ryan. Thank you to Colin. Thank you to Austin for coming on here. It's our first of many because we're going to kind of have a normal quarterly check-in on college hoops, especially before we get into SEC play. So thank you, fellas. And guys, remember, horns always up. Hook 'em.
Welcome.